Hi guys, FrostFangs here, welcome back once again, of course, to another Paladins video. This one's going to be a little bit different from all the other ones I've had on the channel, but this is one that I often get requested to do, and that is a patch overview. The first time I'm doing one of these. Usually I cover all the stuff independently, maybe a few things in one video, but I've never gone through everything in an update and talked about it in kind of a summary sort of thing. So yeah, that's what I'm going to be doing. If you want to scroll through them with me at the same time, you're more than welcome to do so. It's on just the Paladins news page. The update is called Genlock after the Battle Pass theme for the skins, but we do have a new champion. They teased it quite a bit on social media beforehand. Her name is Rei. She is a support with 2200 health, and her tagline is the Scholar of House Ico, similar sort of theme to IO. She does then have a little bit of lore there, but I'm not going to read that out because this is a pretty beefy update. It's the biggest one we've had in a while. It is the mid-season update, so I want to keep this video under like an hour, so I'm going to skip reading parts like this, but I'm sure if you're interested in the lore, you kind of knew it already, and if not and you wanted to hear it, you can just go on the Paladins website, or you can go and just see it in game when it goes into live, because we're going to have the PTS like usual, which I'll be covering a ton. Definitely keep an eye on the channel for videos on that when the server goes up. Then we'll have the update finally out in July, which is what they showed on the trailer, which was really, really cool. I've loved the style of trailers they've been doing recently with the animation style. Looks really, really good. I think it fits Paladins quite well. It makes it look really quite unique. Anyway, on to her kit. I will go through this kind of quickly because I'll be making full videos on Rei in the next couple of weeks, but her weapon, Sigil, she doesn't actually have like a sword or a gun. It's just her hands and kind of her magic. I mean, I guess they call it magical energy here, but it deals 450 every 0.7. Then your alt fire is your main form of healing. You manifest your arcane forces, send it forth, bounces between allies and heals them. I don't think I actually put the number there, but I think it was like 500 or something. I'm recording this like an hour after the live show, which is why I know it's 500, but the people who are linked with your other ability get 30% more healing from this, which is ability 2, which I think is your Q. Obviously chain heals your right click, so yeah, this is your Q. You tether to an ally or an enemy, so she does, at least just from her kit, seem like a bit of a hybrid healer. She doesn't have the craziest numbers ever, but she does seem to be kind of like meant to be played as a bit of a mix of both. But yeah, when you link to an ally, you heal them for 200 and grant 1% ult charge every second, and obviously it buffs out your other stuff. And when you're linked to an enemy, you reduce the movement speed by 10% and deal 50 damage every 0.75, which isn't very much. The ability does look pretty cool. It's similar to stuff in other games, but I wouldn't say it's the main identifier for her kit. It's kind of just the glue for the rest of the stuff. Her ability 1, which envelops you in kind of arcane energy, reducing the maximum amount of damage you can take per instance of damage down to 275. So if you got hit with like a huge ultimate, the max that thing could do would be 275, unless it's tick damage like a Koga weapon, for example, which wouldn't be affected. It also increases your movement speed by 40% for 3 seconds and applies to the person you are linked to. Again, just really showing that that is the glue ability. So that is really, really strong in some situations, whereas in others it's not going to do very much outside of the movement speed. Yeah, her ultimate, Vivify, the last part of her kit other than her talents and her cards and stuff. You target an ally and infuse them with life. You grant damage immunity for 2 seconds. You can't take anything, and then it heals them straight to full after a small delay. And the other really important part to it is that if you're linked to somebody with your kind of glue ability, you'll also yourself be healed to full. I'm pretty sure you also get the immune effect, but don't quote me on that one. Moving on to her talents, the default one increases the range at which your chain heal will bounce by 40%. Very, very basic talent. Makes sense. It is the first one you get. Then the second one you unlock is a little bit weird, but when you link to an enemy with your spirit link, it doesn't do anything else. It's just for when you link to an enemy, you progressively slow them over 3 seconds, and then at the end you root them for a second. It doesn't seem that strong. Maybe it will be used. I don't know. I think because of the fact that you have to be linked for 3 seconds until you root them, it's not really going to be that good. I imagine if it applied the root the second you link to an enemy, maybe then it would be kind of good, but even then it's a bit of a weird one. Then moving on to the one you get at level 8 though, Focus. Your spirit link's cooldown is increased to 6 seconds instead of what it usually is, which is pretty much instant. You can just flick between targets whenever you want, and then only lasts for 2 seconds, but the effects of it are tripled. Another important part to this, which I hope they add to the talent description so that people know, is that it only applies to the actual base effect, so this doesn't triple the effects of cards, which is pretty important. Moving on to some of our cards, I haven't really read through these too much because I like to experiment when the test server's up, so I'm not going to pay too much attention here, but you can reduce the cooldown of your chain heal after you hit an enemy with your Sigil. Again, kind of reinforcing the fact that she's meant to be played as some sort of hybrid healer. You've got the standard health increase, the standard ammo increase. I don't know how much ammo she has by default. Her reloads were really, really cool though. I'm pretty sure she had 6, but don't quote me on that. Her reload was really, really quick, so I can't really imagine this card seeing a crazy amount of use. Definitely not like level 5, but who knows. You then have increased to your movement speed after you get a killer in a limb, another very standard card. Then for the chain heal, you can reduce the damage you take by 1 to 5% for 2 seconds for each ally hit with the chain heal, and this effect does stack. To take in 2000 or 1500 damage, depending on what level the card is, your next chain heal does not cause it to go on cooldown. That's a really cool card, even at level 1. I think that will be used maybe. 2000 is a lot of damage though. You can grant yourself reload speed for 0.5 to 2.5 seconds for each player which your chain heal bounces to. You can grant ult charge for each player in which the chain heal bounces. I feel like I should speed up a little bit here, but Spirit Link, you can increase the heal that it provides to your linked target by 20 to 100. That's a pretty big buff, but also remember that the talent doesn't triple that. This one seemed pretty interesting to me. Arcane Focus. You transfer 25% of of the damage that your ally would take, the one you're linked to if you use your Q, and then you only take 90 to 65% of that damage, so it's kind of a different form of damage reduction. One thing I do want to mention with Rei really quick before I forget is that she doesn't actually have a movement ability. She has no way to move other than just walking. She definitely can defend herself. Again, she's kind of meant to be played as a hybrid as far as I can tell, but she doesn't have any way to move around, so she might be free kills a lot of the time for flankers. Death Magics is pretty straightforward. Linking to a new target reduces your cooldowns by 0.1 to 0.5. Very, very basic card. Don't imagine it will see too much use. Reduce the damage done by an enemy you are linked to with Spirit Link by 5 to 25%. If you're dueling with somebody, you hit them with that mark and they're dealing 25% less, that's going to make a really big difference in a one-on-one kind of situation. Just in case you couldn't tell, I think she has a really good selection of cards. I think a lot of them are going to see use. A lot of them are really, really good, to the point where some other ones that in a lot of situations would seem like solid choices, they're just other ones that are better that you don't really think they're going to get played that much. Moving on to Envelop, you can reduce the cooldown of your friendly target's cooldown by 0.1 to 0.5. You can reduce the cooldown of Envelop by 0.3 to 1.5. You can heal for 50 to 250 when you use Envelop. And then the last card, which I'm a little bit confused about, but increases the max amount of damage mitigated by Envelop by 7 to 35%. So I guess that's just reducing the max amount per instance, I think. Moving on, that's it for Rei, although she does have a skin in the season pass. I'll probably throw up a full screen thing of the art stuff so that you can see it a little bit better, because or else it's going to be kind of weird. This is my first time doing an overview video, so if it's a little bit scuffed, bear with me. I'll try and make it better for the future updates. But then we have a Harvest skin, which is a recolor for Rei, and the golden one. Pretty straightforward stuff. A few emotes here as well. Not going to pay too much attention to this stuff. They are cool, but I don't want to be here all day, so I'm going to go through this stuff kind of quickly. MVP poses. Then we have the crossover pass with the Genlock, which is pretty cool. Very different from most of the skins we have in the game, but I think they still will fit in quite well. We've got a Maeve, we've got a Canessa, we've got a Victor and a Xin, and also a Lex skin. So that's 5. Keeping it rolling though. In the event pass, you also get some sprays, you get some avatars, you get some 3D sprays, which did look pretty cool. A few MVP poses, death card, and also a death stamp, which does also look quite nice. Stuff to do with Trials of the Realm, which I'm just going to scroll past because I don't really want to, again, spend too much time. That is a really cool spray though, like that one a lot. We've then got an update regarding the Bounty Store. They're basically reopening it with some updates. The Bounty Store has been a bit of a mess, but yeah, you can read this here if you're interested. There's Twitch drops, which is quite cool. A few event exclusive stuff, more skins for sale, and additional ways to earn coins by like watching ads in game, which is completely optional. Possibly controversial form of monetization. I personally don't mind it because it is completely optional. If Paladins can get more money and keep the game alive, I'm happy with it. They are being pretty straightforward about not shoving it into people's faces, which would really be when it sucked if you just opened the game and you got like 10 ads, but no, it's a completely optional part of the game that you can just completely avoid if you're not bothered about getting the free currency from watching the ads. But yeah, I'm not going to go into it too much in this video. You can scroll through the patch notes if you want to read all of this, because I want to just move over to the actual gameplay stuff. Some updates with the limited time modes, Pick Any and Hunter vs Hunter, definitely seem fun. Moving on to the customization, we have a 50th Champion Celebration avatar, which I do really like. A Vatu skin, which is top bloody notch. I can't wait to actually make a full video on that one. Try not to pay too much attention to the patch notes show when they're going over the skins to not spoil it for myself. The arms on that Vatu one looked a little bit rigid, but overall I really like it. Then we've got a recolored kind of different version of the Eevee one. They're also going to be adding 3 new chests for cosmetic stuff, Pandemonium, Just Desserts, and Relics of War. Finally moving over to the gameplay and general updates section. Bots will no longer be purchasing items for disconnected players, and alongside that there will also be a disconnected indicator, so you can actually see if one of your teammates has disconnected. They did a few things with it a few patches ago, so you could kind of tell, but now there will actually be an indicator for it, which everybody's been asking for bloody ever. Then they're also doing stuff with the Legacy VGS for PC people, which is really cool. I know a lot of people were bothered about this one. I kind of missed the whoops line, which I used to use quite a lot, or the oops line, I mean, the VVGO. As far as I can tell, they're now making that an option again by opting in with the Legacy deprecated option. Skin previewing is also a thing. We've added the ability to preview full model of a skin in a pre-match lobby. Then there's a few things with ranked. Even though I don't play ranked anymore, they've added an additional ban for ranked matches. Split 2 rewards, play 15, get a gold chest, play 25 and get the Ying avatar, although the map rotation is staying the same. And then finally, the last part of the update, aside from bugs, which I'll maybe go through kind of quickly, is the balance section, which is pretty hefty. Quickly though, if you want to see me do more videos like this, kind of overviews on the patch, so that I don't have to spend as much time explaining in other videos, let me know by dropping a like on the video, and I guess just drop me a comment there as well if you fancy. But they say talents are one of the multiple ways in Paladins to customize your gameplay experience. Some talents weren't providing enough overall playstyle of their champions, and also were underutilized, less liked, or all of the above. I think everybody kind of agrees on that. There are a lot of iffy talents, and they're changing quite a few of them. These talent reworks are meant to be a fresh take on some champions' playstyles, targeted change to specific playstyles that we feel were unhealthy for the game, or in some cases both. They are planning to listen to player feedback and working with the community to embrace the potential of what we intend as new fun aspects of these changes. So the first one, Genos, the Luminaries being reworked. They've been talking about this one for ages. This was the one that just buffed damage to whoever you were healing. Now, all allies that are affected by your mark are healed for an additional 250 when you use your mark. That is pretty interesting and does move away from the damage buff stuff that they've been trying to get away from for a while. They say Luminary has been a contentious topic, especially when it comes to damage amplification in general. That's what I was just saying. I should have read this first. With this change, they hope that it both alleviates some of the problems that can come from directly augmenting other people's damage, while also providing a new way to feel more effective as a generalist focused on keeping your team alive. So they're just kind of removing the damage buff stuff. They've been doing it for a while. It's all obviously personal preference, but I don't mind it too much. Furious one is more interesting to me though, because they're changing how Solar Blessing works. So the way it worked before obviously was you threw the beam, it would stop on somebody and heal them, and it would also reduce the speed of the Pyre Strike. Whereas now, refiring your Pyre Strike, aka just hitting Q again, will stop it in its place, so you can actually position it in an ideal way. Just whenever you want it, you can just tap to Q and do it. It is going to be a little bit more difficult to use, I guess, and because you're going to have more control over it, they're reducing the amount of healing that it's going to give down to 100 from 150 every 0.05, which is a pretty hefty decrease. I'm hoping it will still feel fine now that Yagras in the game. I understand that change even more though. The dev commentary here is that Solar Blessing has been a hot topic for some time now. This change puts a lot more control in the hands of Furia players and subsequently aims to make Solar Blessing feel much more satisfying. I feel like I really should read these out first before I go and say what I was going to say, because I'm basically repeating myself here. But with the increase of control, they're basically just saying that it should be better in ideal circumstances, so they're reducing the heal to kind of make it not too strong. Moving on to Canessa, this is one that I think I'll have to try for myself before I have too many thoughts on it, but they're changing Eagle Eye, so instead of giving the 25% bonus damage on headshots, they're making it so that it increases the fire rate and charge rate at the cost of reduced damage. And you also get increased maneuverability while you're scoped, so essentially you get more movement speed, more fire rate, quicker charge, but you deal less damage. Should be an interesting way to play Canessa, kind of make her feel a little bit more like a charged version of Octavia, I guess. Then they say it's just to make her a little bit less punishing and a little bit more interesting while maintaining kind of the unique thing that Canessa brings to the game. Pretty straightforward. Really want to try that one out for myself though. Atlas has a really interesting one. I'm also really looking forward to this. They're changing Unstable Fisher, which definitely was one of his iffiest talents, and I've heard a few people suggest stuff like this, at least in my comment section. You guys suggested similar things to what they've actually changed it to, but activating your F will now rewind enemies within like a radius around your F. So if you grab Unstable Fisher, you'll also rewind enemies around you instead of just yourself. They say that it was a talent that was rarely utilized, and outside of specific, very situational circumstances, it felt underwhelming. I agree. This change is meant to provide an additional use of the rewind mechanic that requires Atlas to be pretty close to his targets. We hope that it facilitates some new and interesting plays. I'm looking forward to this one. I'll definitely be making full videos on a lot of these because I feel like I could talk a lot more than I am in this video, because I'm trying to keep it short. I've already been recording here for nearly a bloody hour. Anyway though, moving on to Fernando, he's getting 2 of them changed, which is pretty damn interesting. He's the only character who is getting 2, but Formidable and Aegis. Formidable was the one that used to give you healing when you drop below 40% or whatever. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Whereas what it's going to do now in the new update is it gives you 2 charges of your charge, which makes it kind of a confusing sentence, but it deals 100 extra damage and you're CC immune while you're charging, but the cooldown is increased. Definitely kind of hard to tell how that one will feel. It could be a dead talent, could also be really strong. We'll have to wait and see. Then Aegis also is getting a change, which was the one that gave you infinite duration and reduced your cooldown of your shield. What it'll do now is actually give your shield a resource that will recharge over time instead of a cooldown, similar to a Terminus Q or a Khan shield. Definitely something I've thought about before. I don't know if I mentioned it in a video. I've heard other people say that as well, that it should be kind of a chargeable thing, and they're turning it into a talent. I'd also love Fernando to be able to move his shield again. That's from fucking ages ago, but if you've been playing Paladins for ages, like I have pretty much since release, Nando used to be able to move his shield, and I really liked that. They took it away, and that feels still kind of weird to me even now. I'd love to see that possibly tacked on to the Aegis talent so that it would recharge and you could also move it around. That would be really cool. It is a lot of work. That's probably why they haven't done it, but still, Nando's getting some changes. I'm glad to see him. Then in the dev commentary, they say a very similar thing to what they said in the other ones. The current talents aren't that good, so they're changing them to hopefully make them feel a little bit better. For Barak though, he's getting Architectronics changed. Another interesting one. Architectronics, I don't know why I call it Architectronics, but whatever. Increase the damage of your turrets by 20%, reduce the cooldown. It's that one. What it's going to be doing in the new update is reduce the actual amount of ult charge you need to use your ultimate, but then when you do use it, you won't have the shield, you'll just have the little fire turret. It looked a little bit janky in the live show. It had to kind of turn around. It for some reason started facing you, which was weird, and you can have 2 of them active at once. Kind of an alternative way to play damage Barak, I would imagine. Seems interesting. I don't know if it'll be any good. We'll have to wait and see. And then it's also getting a new name. The new name is Forgefire. It's the first time we've had a new name for a talent in ages. I like it. The dev commentary here is that it's another example of a talent that was liked by some, but ultimately could have had a more unique kind of interesting setup. So they're giving Barak even more turrets and kind of just giving him a different way to use the ultimate, because the shield on it often isn't that useful. Now moving on to the item section, there are some really big changes here that I'm really happy to see, and I'm really looking forward to this update in general. It's a huge update, mid-season update, gonna really shake up how Paladins feels, I reckon. The scaling on Quarter Rise is going to change from 25, 50, 75 to 30, 55 and 80, so just 5% over what it's currently at. The same duration, everything else is staying the same. The more important part though is that in the dev commentary they say that Quarter Rise is a larger conversation that needs needs to happen over a larger period of time. They feel that having one or very few items or mechanics that are required, like Hi-Rez for example, because it often is required in a lot of matches, is unhealthy and should be addressed, which I think most people would kind of agree on. That being said, the current change should alleviate some of the concerns the community has brought with Hi-Rez and its scaling and stuff, just to kind of put off basically a larger change, I imagine is what they're trying to say there. Then for Rekka, it's also having its scaling changed from 25, 50, 75 to 30, 60, 90, which makes tons of sense because nobody buys Rekka currently, which is pretty much what they say there in the dev commentary. It does also go along with some of the other changes that are in the items. A bunch of stuff is happening. Bulldozer is having its scaling change as well from 20, 40, 60, 25, 50, 75, with the same kind of dev note as Rekka, that the scaling wasn't really strong enough. I think Bulldozer is fine lower than Rekka, just because deployables in general feel a little bit less annoying than shields do. I feel like Rekka should be a pretty strong item to counter shields, whereas Bulldozer should just be a buff if you're up against a team that has a ton of deployable stuff. Very similar thing is happening to Resilience, the exact same scaling change as Bulldozer, up to 75 at level 3. Then Rejuvenate is also getting a buff from 5, 10, 15 to 6, 12, 18. Then the change to Haven is one of the most interesting ones in this whole update, if you were to ask me, because they're actually removing blast shields, and now Haven will also counter explosive damage, so direct and explosive, but the percentage is going down. So you no longer need to decide if you want to counter area damage or direct damage. You can just counter all damage at a slightly lower percentage, from up to 21% down to up to 18. And you may be wondering, what are they changing out blast shields for? Well, a new item called Guardian, and this will increase the effectiveness of the shields you create by 7, 14 and 21%, although this doesn't affect card or passive generated shields, which is a very important note. I hope they put that in the final section somewhere. Then finally, the last big change for the item section, Veteran is being also replaced, which makes sense because nobody ever really bought Veteran. But what it will do now, instead of increasing the healing you get from being out of combat, it will increase the max amount of health that you have by 4, 8 and 12%. They're also making it more expensive to kind of compensate for that, but that health increase, I think for most characters, if you're a squishy, won't make that big of a difference. 12% is still pretty big, but on characters like tanks, that's actually way more noticeable. Then they mentioned for Veteran that nobody ever really picked it. They wanted to do a similar sort of thing, so they're making it buff health, but so it actually makes a difference in fights instead of how fast you heal out of fights, really. Basically, so you can notice it more actually in gameplay. I am very, very interested to see how these item changes play out. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments on this. And finally, moving over to the balance section, I'm making this seem like it's a bit of a chore. I've been talking here for more than an hour. It really isn't. I'm honestly just mad happy that there's an hour worth of stuff that I can talk about in a bloody Paladins update in 2021. I'm just glad the game is still getting support and updates that make it more interesting. We've got skins, we've got a new character, we've got balance, we've got item changes. There's so much stuff in this update that I really had to make an overview video. But for Atlas, Temporal Divide, it's basically getting a nerf. When you go for the one that makes your Q bigger, the cooldown increase is going to go up to 65% instead of 50, which kind of makes sense. They're saying that the large orb is a little bit too strong, so they're toning it down a bit. Obviously, Barak is having Tinkering changed to go from 510 to 535, which is kind of pushing it up from when it got nerfed before. Then the heal you give to your turret by being around it is going down from 100 to 90. The extra health you can give to your turret is going down to 140. Those are pretty small, I would imagine. One man scrap, the one that gives you reset whenever your turret is destroyed, is going down to 5%. That one's probably a little bit more noticeable because people often rock that level 5, so 30 down to 25% really. Pretty straightforward, not really that much I can add on to the Barak changes. But for Inara, she's getting a buff to her self-heal, which I wasn't really expecting. The one you get in your F is going up to 22 instead of 20, and the right-click one is going up to 28 instead of 25, which is very, very strange to me because I feel like her right-click self-heal was good enough because obviously you get increased healing when you're in your right-click, so it ended up being quite a bit. The one with the F I think needed a buff. I thought that should have gone up to 25 really, but they're actually buffing both of them, and they're also increasing the duration of the right-click to 5.3 seconds. I'm a little bit confused with this change. I didn't think Inara needed the hand, but I guess they feel like she did. Then they're reducing the cooldown of Impasse from 15 to 14, and in the dev commentary they say that Inara has been a staple of frontlines, but they feel like she could do with a few minor buffs to bring it into a slightly better spot. I didn't think she needed any sort of changes at all, but hey, they're giving her a couple buffs. I'm more than happy with that. Makoa is getting a slight buff to his range on his cannon and also his stun. That's more of a fix than anything else. Then for Terminus, Necromantic Might, which is the card that reduces how much damage you need to generate a charge, is being nerfed pretty substantially from 120 to 100. So at max level, which is what a lot of people ran it at, it's going to be 500 reduced damage instead of 600 reduced damage, which isn't going to probably change how much people go for the card, but it should bring it a little bit more in line. Then these other three are kind of fixes, but also affect balance. Devastation, It Watches, Abomination, which are the siphon charge for hitting an enemy with your right click, the siphon charge for hitting somebody with your axe, and the heal with the right click. Now that'll only affect players, pets, and illusions because I'm pretty sure it was triggering on shields. I'll read the dev commentary. Terminus is a champion who performs well at most levels, and part of that is due to inconsistent procs from cards. Now most cards that have procced off of everything in the past, including shields, which is what I thought it was, will only proc when hitting players, pets, and illusions. Then they also mentioned the nerf to Necromantic Might because they thought it was providing a little bit too much value. So that is Terminus, kind of some fixes so that the stuff triggers properly, and then a nerf to the one that makes it a little bit easier to generate your charges. Torvald is next. He's getting some pretty hefty buffs, which I wasn't really expecting. With Torvald, I feel like he gets buffed, then he's too good, then he gets nerfed, he's too bad, and it just kind of goes back and forth. But this is, I guess, more of a change than just a direct buff. So the shield is going from 500 to 650, but it's getting a 50% increase to its cooldown from 6 seconds to 9, which is actually pretty damn big. Then his right click is getting extra range from 50 to 60, and the cooldown is being pulled down to 11, so 1 second off the cooldown, 20% extra range. Then recharge is having its cooldown pulled down by 2 seconds. Gauntlet is actually having its damage buffed from 180 to 190, and Hyper Beam is also getting a 5 bit of extra damage whenever you're hitting somebody. You never really use the ult for damage anyway, but should be a little bit better. Then for the dev commentary, another pretty important one, they say that they'd like to invest more time and resources to make significant sweeping changes to Torvald, as they think that he deserves it. In the short term, however, this should just make him feel a little bit better, although I don't really understand the extra cooldown on the Q. I feel like that could have been 7.5 instead of 9. That seems a little bit too much to me. Now that I think about it, I probably should have mentioned this right at the start of the video, so maybe I'll cut this in at the start, or maybe I'll just leave it towards the end, although I guess if you watch Sway to the end, you probably know this already, but most of these changes are subject to changes. This is the PTS. Stuff often doesn't end up going through the exact same as it is on this sheet that I'm reading right now. Stuff gets tweaked if people think it's too good, or stuff gets buffed up maybe a little bit more if people don't think it's good enough. Stuff changes. If you look at the last update, you can see they changed like 4 or 5 things, so not all of this is final is my point. I can't believe I'm still bloody going, but Yagarath, yeah, Piercing Quills is just having the effect removed from it as far as I can tell here. The extra damage if you use the left click right click combo is just being removed from the ability. I think that's fine. I don't know if everybody even knew that that was a thing that you could do with Yag, like buff the damage with the synergy of the left click right click. But moving on to Primal Vision, they're reducing the time between the pulses by 10%, reducing the overall duration of Primal Vision by 10%, and reducing the duration that enemies are revealed by 15. So just a general nerf / change to how the Q works. Then the spray is having its range buffed by nearly 20% from 90 to 105. I think that makes sense. The range felt a little bit too short. I think 105 is a better place for it to be. Dev commentary there is also kind of interesting. They say that it's obviously just to bring it a little bit more in line, but also that they're investigating additional changes to combat players' pain points. So maybe more changes in the future for Yag, I guess we'll see. Dredge's Mortal Skewer is being nerfed from a max of 400 heal per harpoon down to 350 max. Amani is having some interesting changes. Her right click is going down from 110 to 100 per hit, which is a pretty noticeable nerf to it, and then her Frostbomb is actually being buffed, increasing the minimum damage on detonation by 5% and decreasing the distance required to actually get max damage by 10%, which I think is, again, a pretty good change. Dev commentary there just adding that they're trying to move the power a bit to a Frostbomb away from Inferno Cannon, because that's kind of the way Amani is at the moment. People use her right click and her fire stance way more than the Frostbomb a lot of the time. Then Tiberius is getting some interesting ones. Vicious Assault is going down from 900 to 600 damage when you land, pulling it a little bit under where it was before the buff, but now gives you 2 charges of your F. Combat Trance is then going down from 30 to 25% with the attack speed and movement speed buff that it gives. I think everybody kind of agreed that Combat Trance was a little bit too good, so they're nerfing it. They're also nerfing the heal on the card that you can have down from 50 to 45, which isn't that big, but it will still be kind of noticeable because it is, you know, a trigger every second. Dev commentary there is pretty much what you'd expect. Tyra is having a change that I'm surprised they didn't do earlier in the fray. Is having increased scaling from 4% at level to 5%, so at max it's going to be 25% damage reduction on your nade, but the important part is that it will no longer stack and instead will refresh. It's still really strong. Technically it's more damage reduction than before if you're only using one nade, but you can't stack them anymore and instead just kind of refresh the duration. So now the better way to use it would be to nade and then wait a couple seconds and do it again to refresh those 3 seconds of 25%, which is still pretty damn good, but now you can no longer use all your nades and get a crazy amount of damage reduction for a shorter period of time. I don't know if this is necessarily worse. It's more of just a change. In some situations it might actually be better. Dev commentary there just repeating what I said. It kind of brought crazy amounts of damage reduction that they feel needed to be changed, so they're going to continue to monitor it and we'll see how it goes. Furia, aside from the change to Solar Blessing, which we went through in the other section, I don't know why they put it again here because they didn't put any of the other ones that were talent changes in the balance section, but they did it with Furia's whatever. She's also having a change to Light Forge, which I think will be pretty cool, but could do with a bit of a tweak, and overall this is actually a pretty big nerf to Furia's beam playstyle because this was the one that reset the beam with the right click. Now it's just going to give a movement speed buff. You know, it's still going to be a pretty good card, but the reset one before was kind of an auto include in a lot of setups, and now you're going to have to rely on the reset on the F for the beam, which is kind of strange. Light Forge was definitely a little bit too good because everybody was running it, and they've changed it to a card that I think is fine. The movement speed is interesting, even though it probably won't see play at 0.6 seconds. I don't know how it's going to play out, nerfing the heal by so much and also kind of nerfing the way you were getting reset a lot of the time. I guess I'll read through the dev commentary and see what they say. The greater control afforded to Furia with the talent really should benefit Solar Blessing's playstyle. It definitely will, and we're going to keep a close eye on it. Furia with the right loadouts can currently send out a large number of pyre strikes with various methods of resetting its cooldown, and they're unhappy with it, so they're positioning Light Forge away from the cooldown reset and more into a self-utility option for Furia players who want to better navigate the battlefield while healing. Oh, it increases your movement speed, not the person you're healing. I got it wrong. I don't know, to me that feels kind of weird. I feel like it should buff the speed of the person you heal, or both of you, not just Furia. I'm really glad they added so much dev commentary because they don't usually add this much. It's usually only a couple pieces over the whole patch notes, but most of them have it this time around, and I think they're making it pretty obvious they don't want you to be able to throw out as many beams. So what they're trying to do is basically move that reset onto the F, so you have to use your movement ability and kind of your escape or your get out of jail free card, I guess, to get some reset, and it's a little bit harder to get than just throwing out your heals, which you're doing anyway. I'll of course have to play it to know for sure, but I think it's going to be overall a pretty substantial nerf to Furia. Even though you can stop the beam, I don't think that makes up for the massive reduction in healing, plus the removal of the reset on the right click. Definitely we'll have to wait and see on that one. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on it. For Grok, Totemic Ward is getting a nerf down from 30% increased healing to 10%, and the healing totem's cooldown is actually going from 10 to 13. I understand why they've nerfed Totem Grok, but I think that might be a little bit too much. For Grover, you'll no longer be able to target your allies with your Vine. I think that's fine. Most people didn't really do that intentionally anyway. I don't mind that change at all. I don't think that's really going to affect anybody negatively. For Ceres, her Q is getting increased damage from 60 to 80 per detonation, and also a little bit of increased cooldown to kind of match it. And then Fade to Black is getting a nerf, so you can no longer spam the right click to get a ton of reset off of your F, because the effect will only be able to happen every 5 seconds. I'm going to speed through this last section, but Ying's Resonance is going to have extra speed when your illusions are traveling, and also extra explosion damage from 500 to 550. I think that makes sense. Dev commentary there is pretty standard. Koga is getting a buff. His SMGs are going back up to 38 from 36. I'm really happy with that. I said it in my last Koga video that I think it should be somewhere in the middle. They didn't buff Adrenaline Junkie, but I'm still really happy with the extra damage on Koga. Lex is getting his Discovery nerfed a little bit from 30 to 25. Very small, somewhat basic change. Maeve's Rogue's Gambit is getting a buff. Extra damage from 10 to 15%, and also will reduce the cooldown of Pounce by 2 seconds. Great. Moji, Familiar Spray, is getting a bit of extra range. Scamper is getting a bit of a speed increase. Then your ultimate, when somebody is a cookie, they'll be 10% slower. Pretty straightforward changes for that last few. I'm interested in Maeve's one for sure though. Then finally, right at the end, Vatu's Ambush reduced the amount of time before teleporting 0.4, 0.3. Pretty minor. Vatu, they say here, is doing fine. He could use a little bit of change over time, but in the short term, they've just addressed one of the frustrations that most people had. I definitely did. So it'll be a tiny bit faster when you use your Q to actually get to your target. Should feel a little bit better. And Vora, she's having the lockout time on Obliteration go down from 0.8 to 0.5, which was one of my main problems I had with it. If you haven't watched my Vora video recently, I complained specifically about this, saying that though she is also getting some nerfs to her ultimate, the movement speed bonus is going to go down to 60%, and the cost of using it, if you like cancel it or you die or whatever, is going to actually cost you 50% instead of 30. They say here that she could benefit from quite a few quality of life changes, and one of the biggest ones is the lockout time after Obliteration, so they're making it feel a little bit more as it should. They've heard that there's general frustrations with Vora getting too much value out of her ultimate. You could kind of just use it to escape a lot of the time and only lose 30%. I agree with that, even though it is a nerf. I completely understand it as somebody who likes Vora a lot. So overall, a really, really solid balance section. A lot of changes I'm really happy to see, and a few that I don't understand. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on it. Of course, the patch in general. I'm not going to go through the bug fixes here because this video has been long enough, but there are quite a few, and you can read them on the website or just pause the video if you fancy. They're bug fixes. I don't think they really warrant me reading through all of them, but this has really been quite the journey of a video. I've been recording here for I think nearly 2 hours, something like that. I hope you have enjoyed it. If you want to see me do more overview videos, I will definitely do them because this has been really enjoyable to do and given me a really good chance to just go over everything and give my opinion on a lot more stuff than I usually be able to. And now, even if I don't make videos on some of the smaller things, I at least kind of got to talk about them a little bit. And hey, I guess if you didn't want to read through them, you could have just put me on in the background while you eat your breakfast or something. I don't know. This has been a very different video for me, but I've enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. Of course, leave a like if you enjoyed. I'll see you guys all very, very soon. And as always, stay Frost. That one had energy in it, you can tell. Even at the end of the video, I am pooped right now. That had energy in the outro. If you stayed all the way to the end, which you did if you're hearing me say this, I really do appreciate it. You are a specific type of special MVP, and I honestly thank you for just supporting me and watching my stuff. I hope I entertained you for however long this bloody video was. And again, thank you so much for watching. This is kind of a secondary secret outro. I haven't done one of these post-video notes in a really, really long time. I'll see you all really, really soon. I don't know if I'll have a video tomorrow or the day after because this will probably take a while to put together. But yeah, really thank you for supporting my stuff. And as always, stay Frost.